Maplewood had always been the kind of town where everyone knew each other, where secrets were hard to keep. But no one saw this coming. A beloved cheerleader, a respected coach, and a relationship that should have never happened. It started as whispers in the school hallways, rumors passed between lockers. But by the time the truth came out, one life was lost, and another was ruined forever. How did a promising young girl end up dead? And why did the man everyone trusted have blood on his hands? Maplewood, Ontario, was the kind of town where news traveled fast. Life moved at a steady pace, and people took pride in their quiet community. The local high school, Maplewood High, was the heart of the town, where families gathered on Friday nights to watch football games and cheer on their children. For years, the school had built a reputation for its athletics, with its cheerleading squad being one of the most competitive in the region. Among the cheerleaders was 17-year-old Emma Caldwell. She was the kind of girl everyone noticed, blonde, athletic, and always smiling. She had been a cheerleader since freshman year, and by senior year she had worked her way up to captain. Teachers spoke highly of her, classmates admired her, and parents saw her as a role model. To outsiders, Emma's life seemed perfect, but perfection is often a well-rehearsed illusion. The cheerleading team had recently gotten a new coach, 36-year-old Adam Reynolds. He had moved to Maplewood the previous summer, taking over the program after the former coach retired. Adam had once been a college athlete, and his reputation for discipline and skill made him an ideal fit for the school. Tall, fit, with short dark hair and a confident presence, he commanded attention. His arrival was met with enthusiasm, especially among the cheerleaders. Enthusiasm was met with enthusiasm. Emma was among those who quickly grew close to Adam. As the season progressed, she became his favorite student. He gave her extra attention, helped her perfect difficult stunts, and often stayed after practice to give her individual training. At first, it seemed innocent, just a coach pushing his best athlete to excel. But soon, things took a different turn. Whispers started circulating among the cheerleaders. Emma was spending more time alone with Adam than anyone else. She often stayed late after practice, her car still parked outside long after the others had left. She began dressing differently, more makeup, shorter skirts, an air of confidence that hadn't been there before. Some teammates raised concerns, but no one had proof of anything inappropriate. By November, the rumors had reached faculty members. The principal called Adam into his office, casually mentioning the whispers. Adam brushed it off with ease, saying Emma was simply dedicated and needed extra training for an upcoming competition. With no solid evidence, the matter was dropped. But the truth was much more complicated. Emma and Adam's relationship had gone far beyond student and coach. It had begun in the late summer months, small moments that built into something neither of them could control. He had been careful, making sure no one saw them together outside of school. Emma, however, wasn't as cautious. She started slipping up, mentioning things in conversation that she shouldn't have known about his life, leaving notes in his office that could easily be found. She was in love, but love at 17 is reckless and dangerous. By early December, Emma's friends noticed she had changed. She was distracted, her mind always somewhere else. Her grades started slipping, something that had never happened before. She seemed anxious, as if carrying a secret that was becoming too heavy. Those closest to her assumed it was the stress of senior year, but they had no idea what was really happening behind closed doors. Adam, on the other hand, was growing more distant. What had once been an exciting, forbidden affair was turning into something he no longer had control over. Emma was becoming more attached, more demanding of his time. She wanted more than stolen moments in empty classrooms. She wanted a future. And that terrified him. Everything changed on December 21st, just days before Christmas break. Emma had become frustrated with Adam's coldness. She had spent months giving him her heart, and now he was pushing her away. That afternoon, she confronted him after practice. They argued, their voices echoing through the empty gym. No one was there to hear it. No one except for one of the assistant coaches who had returned to grab his forgotten keys. The next morning, rumors were everywhere. The assistant coach hadn't heard the full conversation, but he had seen enough to know something was off. He reported it to the school board, and by midday, The principal had launched an investigation. Adam denied everything, but Emma? She wasn't ready to stay silent anymore. She told her closest friend, Olivia, that she was in love with Adam and that they had been together for months. Olivia, horrified, urged her to tell someone, but Emma refused. She believed Adam would leave his wife, start a new life with her. When Olivia threatened to expose the truth, Emma broke down. The fear of losing him was unbearable. By nightfall, Adam received an anonymous message. Someone knew. He sat in his car, hands gripping the wheel, heart pounding. If this got out, his career was over. His marriage was over. His entire life would be ruined. That night, Emma left her house, sneaking out as she had done before. She went to meet Adam, believing he had finally made a decision. She never returned home. Emma's parents noticed her absence the next morning. It wasn't like her to miss breakfast or leave the house without a word. At first, they assumed she had gone for an early practice session. But when her phone went straight to voicemail, concern turned to alarm. By noon, they had contacted Olivia, who revealed Emma's troubling confession from the day before. That was when panic truly set in. The police were called, and a missing person report was filed. Officers searched the neighborhood, questioning friends, teammates, and faculty members at Maplewood High. It didn't take long for Adam Reynolds' name to come up. He was the last known person Emma had confided in, and the accusations swirling around their relationship couldn't be ignored. When police arrived at Adam's house, his wife answered the door. Confused and visibly shaken, she called for her husband. He emerged, eyes heavy, posture stiff. The officers wasted no time. They asked about Emma, about the nature of their relationship, about where he had been the previous night. Adam denied any wrongdoing. He claimed he hadn't spoken to Emma outside of school since the investigation began. His words were firm, but his hands trembled. The officers noted his unease. They requested access to his vehicle, a black SUV parked in the driveway. He hesitated, but with no legal grounds to refuse, he handed over the keys. The interior was clean, too clean. A slight chemical scent lingered, barely noticeable, but it raised a red flag. A forensic team was called to inspect further, and what they found changed the course of the investigation. Traces of blood, small but undeniable, were detected on the back seat. Testing confirmed it was human. The SUV was impounded, and Adam was taken in for further questioning. With no body, no confirmed crime, and only circumstantial evidence, the police couldn't hold him. He was released that evening, but the suspicion around him only deepened. Meanwhile, search efforts for Emma intensified. Volunteers combed through wooded areas, abandoned buildings, and stretches of highway leading out of town. Flyers with her picture were posted across Maplewood. The community rallied, but as days passed with no leads, hope started to wane. Then, on December 26th, 5 days after Emma vanished, a hiker discovered something horrifying. Deep within a wooded area, miles from town, lay a shallow grave. Inside, wrapped in a thin sheet, was Emma Caldwell. Her body was covered in bruises, her face barely recognizable. The medical examiner later confirmed she had been strangled. The discovery sent shockwaves through Maplewood. The truth is often buried beneath lies, hidden in the shadows, where no one dares to look. But once a secret is exposed, there's no turning back. What really happened that night? Who knew more than they admitted? Keep watching, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because the answers might be more disturbing than you think. The investigation now shifted from a missing person case to a homicide. Authorities retraced Emma's final steps, analyzing phone records, security footage, and witness testimonies. Digital forensics revealed that she and Adam had exchanged messages the night she disappeared. The texts, though hastily deleted from Emma's phone, were recovered from Emma's cloud storage. They painted a damning picture. Emma had begged Adam to meet her, pleading for answers. He had reluctantly agreed, instructing her to a secluded location outside town. That was the last anyone had heard from her. Surveillance footage from a gas station near the meeting spot showed Adam's SUV passing by at the exact time Emma would have arrived. Further analysis of his vehicle revealed more blood beneath the seat fabric, previously missed. A strand of Emma's blonde hair was found near the passenger door. It was enough for an arrest warrant. Adam Reynolds was taken into custody on December 28th. His wife collapsed in tears as officers led him away. He maintained his innocence, claiming he had met Emma that night, but she had left unharmed. His story unraveled quickly under scrutiny. His alibi was weak, and the physical evidence was overwhelming. During trial preparations, prosecutors uncovered even more disturbing details. Adam had a history of inappropriate relationships with students, though none had ever been proven. Former cheerleaders came forward with unsettling accounts of uncomfortable encounters, though none had escalated as far as Emma's case. Emma? In court, the prosecution laid out a chilling timeline. Emma had gone to the meeting expecting a confession of love, a promise for the future. Instead, she had met betrayal. Adam, fearing exposure, had killed her in a panic. The defense argued it was an accident, that Emma had threatened to ruin his life and he had only tried to silence her momentarily. The jury didn't buy it. On March 15th, Adam Reynolds was found guilty of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole for 25 years. The courtroom was filled with silent grief. Emma's parents clutched each other, their faces etched with sorrow. Olivia, her closest friend, wept as justice was served, though no verdict could bring Emma back. Maplewood High never fully recovered from the tragedy. The cheerleading team disbanded for a year, unable to continue under the weight of its dark history. The town, once lively and filled with school spirit, carried a permanent shadow. Emma's story became a cautionary tale, a reminder that even the most trusted figures could hide unthinkable secrets. Her family, determined to keep her memory alive, founded a scholarship in her name. Every year, a student with dreams as bright as Emma's was given the opportunity to pursue their future. It was a small beacon of hope in the wake of an unimaginable loss. Though Adam Reynolds sat in prison, serving his time, the scars he left on the community would never fade. Emma Caldwell's name remained etched in Maplewood's history, a reminder of a young life taken too soon, and a crime that should never have happened. Months passed, but the wounds left by Emma Caldwell's murder remained fresh in Maplewood. The trial had been swift, but the emotional toll lingered. The once vibrant high school hallways felt empty. Students avoided the cheerleading locker room, unable to shake the memories attached to it. Teachers spoke in hushed tones, and parents kept a closer watch on their children. It was as if the town itself had been altered, unable to return to what it once was. Adam Reynolds sat in a maximum security prison, adjusting to a life he never imagined for himself. He had been a respected figure, a family man, a mentor. Now, he was a convicted murderer, despised by those who once admired him. His wife had filed for divorce immediately after the sentencing, taking their 2 young children and leaving town. She had claimed ignorance of his affair, though whispers suggested otherwise. Regardless, she wanted no part in the shame he had brought upon their family. Inside his cell, Adam spent hours replaying the night of December 23rd in his mind. His version of events differed from the prosecution's narrative. He had insisted that Emma had grown desperate, that she had threatened to tell the school board, his wife, and the police if he didn't leave his family for her. He claimed she had become hysterical, screaming that he had used her, that he had no intention of ever being with her. The prosecution had dismissed his account, painting him as a manipulative predator who had groomed Emma for months. The jury had agreed, convinced by the overwhelming evidence. The text messages, the blood in his SUV, the security footage. It all pointed to a man who had carefully orchestrated a meeting to silence a girl who knew too much. But Adam swore he hadn't planned to kill her. He claimed it had been a moment of fear, a lapse in judgment that turned deadly. The details of what happened between them that night would remain his alone to know. Whatever version was true, the reality remained the same. Emma Caldwell had died at his hands, and nothing could undo that. Back in Maplewood, Olivia struggled to move forward. She had been Emma's closest friend, the one who had known about the affair, the one who had warned her to stay away. Guilt weighed heavily on her shoulders. Had she done enough to protect her friend? Had she missed signs that things were escalating? She couldn't escape the questions that haunted her every night. Emma's parents, Mark and Linda Caldwell, found themselves trapped in a cycle of grief and anger. Their daughter had been a bright, talented young woman with a promising future. She had been deceived, manipulated by a man they had trusted. Their days were filled with court hearings, media interviews, and well-meaning neighbors offering condolences. But none of it could bring back their only child. They had debated leaving Maplewood altogether, but something kept them rooted. Perhaps it was the need for closure, or the desire to see Emma's name live on through the scholarship they had established in her honor. Every year, a student with aspirations in journalism, the career Emma had once dreamed of, would receive financial aid to pursue their education. It was a small way to ensure her voice was never forgotten. The high school underwent changes in the wake of the scandal. New policies were put in place, stricter guidelines for teacher-student interactions. Adam Reynolds had been the first faculty member to be exposed for inappropriate conduct, but rumors suggested he wasn't the only one. Other staff members came under scrutiny, though no one else was charged. For a while, the town was consumed by the case. True crime documentaries picked up the story, news outlets covered every development, and strangers on the internet dissected every detail. Some blamed Emma, accusing her of knowingly engaging in a forbidden relationship. Others defended her, arguing she had been manipulated by a man in power. The truth lay somewhere in between, but the only person who could fully tell it was gone. Eventually, the media attention faded, replaced by newer tragedies and scandals. Life in Maplewood moved forward, but the memory of Emma Caldwell lingered. The cheerleading squad returned the following year with new faces, a different coach, and a stricter selection process for faculty advisors. Teachers became more cautious, afraid of being accused of misconduct. Parents kept closer tabs on their children, fearful of history repeating itself. Olivia found herself drawn to journalism, inspired by the friends she had lost. She wrote articles for the school newspaper, later attending college to study investigative reporting. She vowed to expose those who abused their power, to tell the stories of victims who could no longer speak for themselves. Emma's story had shaped her path, given her a purpose. As for Adam Reynolds, his name was rarely spoken in Maplewood anymore. He was a ghost of the past, locked away in a prison cell, his once promising life reduced to a series of routine tasks behind bars. Some believed he would eventually confess to the full extent of his crimes. Others doubted he ever would. The only certainty was that Emma Caldwell had been taken too soon. Her story remained a cautionary tale, a tragedy that had left an indelible mark on those who had known her. In the end, the affair that had begun in secrecy had led to an outcome neither Emma nor Adam had ever imagined. One life ended, another ruined, and a town forever changed. Years passed, but the memory of what had happened to Emma Caldwell never truly faded from Maplewood. The town had changed, shaped by the tragedy that had once dominated its headlines. The high school had long moved forward, new students filling the hallways, unaware of the scandal that had once tainted their school. Teachers still spoke in hushed voices about what had happened, warning new staff to be careful about boundaries. Parents remained cautious, watching over their children more closely than ever before. For Olivia Bennett, however, time had done little to ease the pain of losing her best friend. She had carried the weight of Emma's death with her for years, using it as motivation to pursue a career in investigative journalism. She had spent her college years writing about cases similar to Emma's, stories of betrayal, power imbalances, and young lives taken too soon. She had even been invited to speak at conferences about ethics in journalism, using Emma's story as an example of how the truth, no matter how painful, needed to be told. On the 10th anniversary of Emma's death, Olivia found herself back in Maplewood, standing before the familiar gravestone in the town's small cemetery. The inscription read, Emma Caldwell, 200, 32021, beloved daughter, cherished friend, a voice that will never be silenced. Her fingers traced over the cold stone, memories rushing back in an instant. She could still see Emma's bright smile, still hear her laughter. It was impossible to forget the way they had spent hours talking about the future, making plans for a life that Emma never got to live. That night, a small vigil was held in Emma's honor. Her parents had organized it every year, keeping her memory alive. Though the crowd had grown smaller over time, the people who truly mattered still showed up. Former classmates, old teachers, a few townspeople who had followed the case closely. Mark and Linda Caldwell, once shattered by grief, had found a way to keep going. Their marriage had nearly fallen apart in the aftermath of Emma's death, but they had fought to stay together. They had dedicated their lives to advocating for stronger protections against teacher misconduct, working with school boards across the country to enforce stricter regulations. Their loss had turned into their purpose. As candles flickered in the cold night air, Olivia spoke about Emma, about who she was beyond the tragedy. The world had come to know her as the girl who had fallen for her coach and paid the ultimate price, but she had been so much more than that. She had been a writer, a dreamer, a loyal friend. She had been someone who saw the best in people, even when she shouldn't have. And Adam Reynolds? He had faded from public memory, his name spoken only in whispers. After his conviction, he had been sentenced to life in prison with no chance of parole for 25 years. For the first few years, he had made occasional headlines, appeals denied, requests for early release rejected. But over time, people stopped caring. His former students no longer spoke about him. His once loyal supporters had moved on. Inside prison, he had few visitors. His ex-wife had remarried, his children had grown up without him. The only people who acknowledged his existence were the guards and the handful of inmates who knew about his case. He had spent years denying full responsibility, maintaining that Emma had manipulated him just as much as he had her. But in the end, it didn't matter. He was forgotten. Olivia had once wondered if he regretted it, if, in the quiet of his cell, he ever thought about what he had done. Did he replay that night in his mind the way she did? Did he hear Emma's voice, the way it must have sounded in her final moments? Or had he convinced himself he was the victim in all of this? She would never know, and maybe that was for the best. As the vigil ended, Olivia stood with Mark and Linda, their hands clasped tightly together. They spoke briefly about the past, about how much Emma would have loved to see the work they had done in her name. There was sadness in their voices, but there was also strength. They had made sure their daughter's story was never forgotten. As Olivia walked away from the cemetery, she felt something she hadn't in years: peace. Emma had been more than just a victim of a crime. She had been someone who had lived, who had dreamed, who had mattered. Her story had been told, and it would never be erased. One life lost, one future destroyed, and one question that still haunts this case: was justice truly served? If you think you know how this ends, think again. Subscribe now for more shocking true crime stories that reveal the truth behind the headlines.